Hello everyone, welcome to week 10. So we got to meet on Meet, finally, last week. I think it was very useful for us to do that. It cleared up any questions that individuals had. Some of you had questions that, for whatever reason, you hadn't asked me because of our class structure, the videos, or maybe some of you had said you'd sent emails, but I hadn't responded. I'm not sure. I respond to everything I get. The fastest response will usually be Kakao Talk. So get in touch there. And of course, my contact info is on Weebly and DM. Otherwise, you could text me on there, or you can try the email. Messages on the site itself, I don't always see because I'm not using the app with notifications. I'm using the PC. So that's good to have caught up and cleared up some of our problems from last week. So we've got this week and next week will be videos as usual posted on the DNUE Canvas site. Then we have 3 weeks in class doing activities, which will be great practice for you to see what works and what doesn't. And then the final week, we'll see, but probably it will be the quiz. And we'll see what format the lesson will be then once we've done our week 12, 13, 14 face-to-face classes. Right, couple of things. I updated this briefly. So week 10, it says feedback. Now, when you click on number 10, it shows this PDF. Now, originally, the rubric looked like this. So this was the 2019 rubric. It had the same 3 parts: activities, TE, what you do, and language, what you say, but it included a part called feedback. And that was there to encourage, ensure that you listen to students and respond to them. So that's done by these 5 different methods. Well, repeat, clarify, prompt, giving recast, or as we've seen in the other paper, doing nothing. Now, it's difficult for you to imagine what students might say, what they might do, without seeing them in the real class. So I've taken that out. But I think it's important to still cover it now. First, to be better teachers, and second, to allow you to build more language in your script, especially the first 3, repeat, clarify, and prompt. So it allows you to imagine what students might say when you ask questions, when you give directions, and how or what you say next. So first of all, feedback is very important. It's one of the most important things to show that you are a good, caring, listening, responsive teacher. It's difficult when I talk to a camera to get your feedback because I can't see you. And this is one reason I wanted to do Google Meet last week. I can see who's understanding, who's following, who has questions. So in your script, it says here feedback time. Now, first of all, feedback is when you say something, or when, for example, a student makes a mistake, what could you say in response? Now, that's how I usually do it in the class. Do you repeat the mistake? Do you ask a question? Do you prompt them to make the answer? And these other 3 that I'm leaving for now. So repeating a problem word, repeating a keyword is a good way to add language to your script. And as we said, you are trying to maximize students' exposure to language, right? So that comes under paraphrasing here, maximizing students' English exposure. Using different words is one key way to do that. So this is also a kind of feedback, right? Clarify, asking a question. It could be a question about a mistake or a word. And again, we've got lots of different ways to ask questions here. I strongly encourage you to ask lots of good questions in your script. So those are not the ones like, do you understand? Are you listening? Or got it? And then prompt is another easy one where you repeat the correct part of a sentence and the student hears that problem and tries to finish with the correct answer. So here's a good way to picture it in a flowchart form. I've made this for corrections, which means the student will make a language error, make a mistake, and the teacher corrects. So as I said, this digital semester, we don't have students, so it's difficult to do this, but let me show you the process. So they make a mistake. Your first question you ask yourself as a teacher is, can that student self-correct? Can they correct their own mistake? Of course, you want students to think and to try again. That's better than teaching. You might also ask the questions, did I teach that thing, that grammar or that language before? Because if you didn't, then they might not know it. So by doing self-correction, you're using this repeat, clarify, or prompt. Okay, and I'm going to focus on this for our digital example. So the teacher asks a question, pointing to a picture on the screen, like a story or something. What did the boy do? And the student says, the boy ran to school. So this is the language error, the mistake. So the teacher hears this and can either repeat or ask or prompt for the student to self-correct. Here are some examples. If I repeat, the teacher repeats, he says the boy ran to school, like this. And of course, you could do this in your script to show me you're emphasizing this, or to show me that you're first asking another question, or second, you are aware of the kinds of responses that students might give. You could ask a question, like repeating the question, what did the boy do? Or you could prompt the boy, and by hearing this, the student tries to correct the wrong part, or maybe another student does. So that's the typical process. So as I said, it's not actually graded in our script, but these are part of language, which is part of asking questions and paraphrasing. And it will give you more opportunity to show that you're listening and responding to students, which is always a good thing. Right, so that's feedback, briefly. I also want to outline, again, the grammar games. Now, most of you are submitting this week and may or may not have time to watch this video. I did talk about it with those students last week in Meet. I'm also going to cover songs briefly this week so that you know what to do if you're doing a song micro lesson for next week. So if we go back to the Weebly site and we click on micro lessons, as we discussed last week, each A, B, C, D, E type of lesson is a little different. The grammar review activities, you're doing preparation, which means reviewing vocabulary and grammar. Now I'm doing this quite early, week 2 of the second micro lesson, because some of you might have grammar that needs to be reviewed for students to complete the core activity successfully. But it's essential in this week's lesson that you cover some grammar. And I showed you some examples of choices that you might make, can or can't, or subject verb, I am, they are, and singular, plural, etc. You're using it in a game, which is the core activity. Then you are assessing students in a follow-up activity. check what they've learned. And when you click on that, it gives you example grammar games. They are just examples. You could modify or change one of the vocabulary activities on Weebly. But here you'll see different things, starting with some more difficult ones like DIY word order here, which is DIY, of course, stands for do it yourself. So you're putting a sentence back into the correct order. This is a difficult example, too difficult for elementary school. Keep it simple. One thing to bear in mind is the difficulty of the grammar. So if you were reviewing, let's say, colors, like of flags, and you wanted to also do subject verb. So let's say a typical sentence might be, I have a red and white and blue flag. And you want to make sentences like this, you know, she has a yellow and green flag, like this. Now, so then you've got grammar. I have, she has. So the words change according to the subject, I and she. Don't review articles like a. So if you cut a or even the into a separate word in this game, students will need to know how to use definite article, indefinite article, or maybe zero article, which is too difficult for children. So to show a quick example of what I mean. So in this example, red, bad, green, good. My grammar might be subject verb agreement. So I have is correct, I has is wrong, etc. And my word group might be colors. So I've got red, white, blue, etc. Maybe 20 colors. I could also include countries if I changed this sentence type. So you'll see here a good sentence. She has a red and white and blue flag. So maybe they have to match a picture to, you know, a person holding it, etc., and make this sentence with this game. Alternatively, I have a red and white and blue flag is a good sentence. Grammar's good, but I'm highlighting the problem of separating the article a. Because when you separate this, it has to agree with the noun that it goes with, and that brings a problem that is too difficult for students to know exactly when to use it, when not to use it. A versus an is okay though, because that's easier, because it's a simpler rule. You know, an comes before the A, E, I, O, U vowels. So an apple, an orange, but a red is okay because it's not a vowel. There's no A, E, I, O, U. So that you could do that kind of game. Rounders, other ones, substitutions. I've added some games that you will see as quite familiar. So Tic-Tac-Toe is really just like, what do you call it again? Forgotten the name, bingo. Too obvious, too easy. Don't just use a game that students already know, because then there's not so many directions to give. The whole point of the game is for students to follow your directions in a new game or activity so that they can play it successfully. So if you were to choose this, which again, students will know as bingo, change it, change the rules, do it differently, or add rules, adapt it. So that's grammar. And in reality, that lesson would only be 15 to 20 minutes in the classroom. So as I discussed with, I think, every class last week in Google Meet, I'm using songs, books, and videos. So that means for micro lesson C and D, and maybe E, depending on what kind of lesson you're doing. If you're using a movie clip or an audio clip or something, then that applies to you too. In other words, using the monitor or singing or reading, you are doing before, while, and after activities. Now, a little different name because of this. So before is a preparation, after is a core, but the new activity for this is while. And as discussed, it's to keep students focused on your keywords and vocabulary. I've added there no follow-up activity needed. No follow-up for any song, rhyme, or story book activities needed. It's optional. I mean, if you feel it's necessary in your lesson or you have a good idea for a short follow-up to assess students individually, go ahead. But I'm focused on these three to keep it fair for all lessons, because all lessons have 3 parts, or certainly A, B, C, D does, and E actually. Okay, so for the songs, just choose a song. When you click on some of these, I think most of the links work. It takes you to a song on YouTube. A lot of them are super simple learning. Some of the other ones are or let's see what skeleton animals is. Okay, so they're pretty simple songs, right? I did that deliberately for you to focus on your lesson and not on difficult language, right? So choose it according to the language, so animals, etc. So that again means it's a vocabulary lesson. But when you play the video, students should be actively doing something. And as I pointed out, you might get some ideas by clicking on the storybook activities, which opens up the storytelling file, which has a lot of different ideas for what to do while students read, or in your case, while students sing or watch a video. This is why you do that, keep their interest. I should add to focus their attention on the keywords as well. Some ideas, more information you'll find down this file. And I said already, jump up word cards I did in the midterm. Labeling, true or false questions. There's, whistling to indicate a missing word. Predict what animal comes next. Anything like that. Word cards are very useful. So then every student has a different card, one of your keywords like animals, and they have to do something, say it, or write it on the board, right? It's a simple activity to keep students focused on the keywords. So that's songs. Don't choose a Beatles song or something which isn't focused enough on vocabulary. It's too difficult. Okay, so that brings us to the craft lessons, which I think is the last thing that I want to focus on, and what we'll start here and finish in part 2. It's good, important feedback for everyone, because I expect each week's lessons will get better and better. So watch the videos, pay attention to what's working, what's not. And as I said, when you go to classwork, you'll find the Google Drive folder, which it looks like everyone's putting it in the right place, which is good. I've organized it by the lesson type. So when I click on craft, I should have all 21 different lessons here. Now I'm going to start reviewing them. I won't manage to do everybody's in the video, but there will be individual feedback posted to you. So watch out for that. You should receive it by email, I think. I'll give comments on each different craft lesson. Now we'll see what format you've uploaded, but if you've uploaded is a Google Doc or Google Doc or a Word doc, I should be able to edit in Docs. This is good for me because then I can add comments, and when I save it, I believe you are notified and you have access to see your file as well. And I'll share the contact with you because I am making folders to keep it organized so I can see who's finished, who's reviewed, who's graded, and who isn't. And if you use Google Docs, of course, Google integrates its grammar correction. So you'll see all these blue lines. It gives you suggestions for improvements how to ask for a job. So this is better English than this. And then tell me what is the question in this answer is better. And you'll be able to avoid all of these small accuracy errors. I do recommend you use that. I did say I'm not checking for accuracy, but it's laziness not to use something like this, or Grammarly, or Ginger, but this is a super simple integrated correction for you for now and for the future. So Google Docs or Word is a good way to upload your file. And then the comments will be nice and easy and clear for you and me to add and for you to read. Actually, I'll just correct myself. I said this would be better, but reading it, it's, yeah, tell me what is the question for this answer. And you're imagining pointing to the board, of course, which everyone should do, and use that in language like we have here. So here, this is an example where you've tried to avoid using if, which is good. But rather than just deleting if or when is another grammar structure to avoid, which means it's not correct grammar, ask a direct question. Like, Tim, does your team know the question? Yes? Okay. So raise your hands like this. Do it that way. If you do it by demonstrating, you can avoid bad grammar as sentences or questions. Okay, so another quick point. So we've got in the lesson goals. I like good to see my word being used to consolidate, to deepen the learning about job words, and also do subject-verb agreement. I have, she has, etc. Preparation activities normally quite short. So here the student has chosen the Q to the A, which is actually a technique. Now that's fine. You've adapted it to suit. Instead of choosing one of the P activities here, and it works. Let me see. But probably I would cover the I have, she has, or I am, they are, etc. before even doing this. It's covered in the activity, but you might quickly do it as a blank fill, a gap fill on the board or the screen. Or, yeah, so the jobs I think would be covered. You've said at the end, you know, that you're continue to play a game with 10 questions, which also works fine. Try to keep simple present tense. There's no need for did in these cases. So do you have two papers would work. So I mentioned feedback in today's video already. This is a good place to use a prompt, for example. So the student has introduced different weather, how there's a pattern, sunny, cloudy, windy, and then introduced fog. So that's a good time to use a prompt. Like you're pointing to the board, you write fog, and students should remember to add the E part, and you write GY. Prompt using the board as a question. And of course, the goal of the preparation activity is to prepare students for the core activity, which for crafts is after you've made the activity. This is one of the problems of choosing things like weather, because there's not too many different weather words that we use. And here we've got cloudy, sunny, windy, foggy. Not all 20 words are covered. If there are 20 for weather, which there really aren't, so your preparation activity needs to cover all the words needed for the core. So either there's not enough words, or you need to add another group, or they haven't all been covered in the P activity. So here's a good chance to point out about questions. There's a lot of directions here, which is typical of a script. And you need to infuse or to add lots of different questions to make sure students are following with you. So here, shoot of paper, etc., etc. And then you ask, does everyone understand? Again, try and avoid this by asking specific questions. So if you say this, this is where you ask, for example, okay, how many pairs of scissors per team? How many glue sticks per team? Like this. Specific questions with specific convergent answers. And once again, now it's early days, first scripts I'm reading, but this is to point out the problem. So we've got a question here. Is everyone done with the dice? And then there's this rhetorical tag question here. But when it continues, there's only directions. This is teacher telling students. There's nothing to confirm that students are listening and that they understand. So you need to infuse this, you need to add lots of questions and paraphrase to ensure interaction with students. So in the real class, you have no idea if students are following or not. Okay, anyways, I think at this point, I'll finish part one. Part two will be more feedback.